council members and participants, we are now live.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to reconvene this morning's hearing. Next up, we will have the District Attorney's Office, Mr. Larry Krasner. Mr. DA, are you connected?
Yes, I believe so, Council President.
Okay, thank you. Just state your name for the record, please, and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Larry Krasner. I am the elected district attorney in Philadelphia. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging Council President Darrell Clark and Majority Leader Sherelle Parker, as well as the other members of council on this call or who are interested in this call. We understand what a heavy task it is to address the budget every year with so many different entities within the city. And so we're going to try to be respectful of your time. I'll speak to that in just one moment. I also want to acknowledge that on this call and available for any questions, we have Robert Listenby, who is a First Assistant DA in the office. We have Judge Carolyn Temmon, also a First Assistant DA. We have Assistant DA Mike Lee, who is our Director of Legislative Affairs, Cecilia Madden, who is our Director of Administration, and we also have G. Lamar Stewart, Chief of Community Engagement Unit, so that we are better prepared to address any questions. We are going to attempt to do a presentation in about 30 minutes, beginning now and going till approximately 2:20, with the idea that that may allow as long as council members want, but that may allow 30 minutes or so for question and answer if that's what the council chooses to do. There are 12 slides.
Yeah, you said, yes. Make sure I'm clear. You said the presentation will be 30 minutes?
That's our intent, Council President.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just say this, if I may. There are 12 slides of substance, a couple of filler slides that we're going to address at the same time we're making our presentation. We'll spend about 2 minutes on each slide. We know that there may be questions relating to those slides, but rather than anticipate possible questions, we'll try to keep it moving. Like many residents across the city of Philadelphia, the pandemic has made this year a very difficult one for all of our Philly residents and the DAO staff. Attorneys, supervisors, and support staff assigned to the homicide and non-fatal shooting unit, to the juvenile unit, and to our gun violence task force, as well as CARES, our victim witness services unit and community engagement unit, have been working every day during the pandemic to seek justice on behalf of the Commonwealth and to support crime victims and communities impacted by gun violence. We are committed to working collaboratively with city government, our law enforcement partners, faith leaders, community-based organizations to reduce crime in general and gun violence specifically. We will not tolerate the senseless shootings and will vigorously prosecute gun-related cases. Our conviction rate as of the first quarter of 2020 was nearly 85% for all shootings, fatal and non-fatal. Monday of this week, we did a press conference in which we detailed the challenges, but also the success that we had in a very recent jury trial involving a shooting. Jury trials are happening again, not in great numbers, but they are happening again. And so we want to make sure that the council and the public understand that we believe young people need to be able to live and play in their communities safely. Young people like the 6-year-old girl who 2 days ago was shot on the 3800 block of Wyalusing, or like Kyrie Simmons, a 16-year-old who was shot while playing basketball at the Christie Rec Center, or like Kwame Mitchell, the 16-year-old who was gunned down in the 12th Police District just weeks before his high school graduation. Slide 3, please. Our office is committed to seeking justice for victims, co-victims, survivors, and communities impacted by gun violence. We are committed to holding drivers of gun crime accountable when arrests are made by the Philadelphia Police Department. And we are committed to helping support the police department in necessary efforts to increase the rate at which these cases are solved. I'd like to speak to you briefly about the gun court program. This is a program where I believe the FJD and also the DA's office, among others, deserve credit, public defenders as well. And by the way, I want to be clear that this office thinks it is extremely important that the public defender's office be well funded, because in order for us to address the tremendous caseload that we now face, partly as a result of the pandemic, it will be very important that the public defenders are well funded. There's no way that we can address a serious caseload without proper funding for both defense counsel and for the prosecution. It just doesn't work otherwise. But let me get back to what I was saying about gun court. So what is happening with gun court, an idea generated by the FJD and supported by us, is that there is a designated court where cases involving guns that are not shootings now go. And we have assigned our most experienced trial attorneys to be in that room. We are seeing some very good results as the outcome of many different measures of cooperation and collaboration with the PPD and the FJD. Since March of 2021, 92% of these cases have been held over for a trial, which is a very high rate. The Homicide and Non-Fatal Shooting Unit, which of course began as a homicide unit, and we united with the attorneys who were prosecuting shootings, is supervised by ADA Chesley Lightsey, ADA Sherelle Dandy, and ADA Joanne Pescator. For the first time in District Attorney's Office history, we have been invited during the past couple years by the PPD to assist with shooting investigations in addition to homicide investigations. We have for some time pushed the shooting cases to the same group of judges who were handling preliminary hearings in homicide cases, and we have seen some very good results from that collaboration, also with the FJD and the Public Defender's Office, since before the pandemic. That was all done prior to the pandemic. But we are now, due to the reopening of the courts, which is starting, not nearly complete, but starting, we're returning to full court preliminary hearing schedule for the first time since September 2020 for homicides and non-fatal shootings. For example, we had 14 cases held over for trial last week. And finally, under this category, we initiated an intelligence unit under the leadership of Chance Lee, very experienced DA in our office. We have specially assigned staff whose primary focus is to improve information sharing between the police department and the DAO to identify drivers of gun violence. And for the very first time in history, this is a very recent development with the police department, we have ADAs, in other words, attorneys from our office, who actually are assigned and located in the DVIC, which is the intelligence unit for the police department. So in real time, we can try to work with them to improve cases and improve their handling. And we're grateful to the commissioner for agreeing to do that with us. Next slide, please. Responding to gun violence requires prosecutorial accountability for people that commit violent acts. Successful prosecution relies on partnerships with fellow law enforcement. Those partnerships, for example, include the Gun Violence Task Force. This was an idea that our police commissioner came up with, and we thought was an excellent idea. And essentially every week we take a look at that week's gun violence cases, not necessarily every single one, but broad categories, to look for any flaws in those cases and see whether we can fix them at the micro level. But at the macro level, what we are looking for is training problems, policy problems, misunderstanding of the law, anything that the DA's office can do better, anything that the PPD can do better, and we've seen some tremendous results coming out of that. There was a recent press conference that was also done with the Attorney General's office on joint efforts to get at ghost guns. I'm sorry, I'm confusing two things. Gun Violence Task Force can mean two different things, but the GVTF is a collaboration with the AG's office in which our lawyers work with their agents, and that has involved work on ghost guns. There's a separate task force involving gun violence, which is being done with the PPD, which we frequently refer to as the Gun Crime Strategies and Prevention Collaborative. All right, let me skip ahead. We are involved with the Group Violence Intervention Program, sometimes referred to as Focused Deterrence, and the Working Group, sometimes called the Task Force, which I mentioned earlier, continues to meet weekly. It has been so successful that it became the basis for the decision that we could actually put DA personnel into the intelligence unit, not merely to look back at cases that week and try to make them better, but to try to fix cases in real time, and we're grateful for that collaboration with the PPD. Next slide, please. Families of a homicide, the victims want their loved one back, and a courtroom, a prosecution, and a conviction will never do that. Prevention of the initial shooting, prevention of the initial killing is what all families want. So we need to discuss resources then. Previous administration's handling of forfeiture assets and funds was illegal and resulted in a very long lawsuit, which fortunately has now ended, and which guides how we must use civil asset forfeiture funds moving forward. What it means essentially is we cannot use them for salaries, we cannot use them internally. as they were used in the past and as the federal courts determined in a settlement was illegal. But we are putting them to good use in ways that we believe are very important to public safety and that benefit the city. I would say about 10 days ago, we announced our first round of funding, 5 $25,000 grants to 5 different organizations. I'll mention them so that you all understand what we're getting at. One of them was Mighty Writers, a nonprofit in Philadelphia that helps young people learn to write in many different ways. Song lyric, poetry, short stories, or simply to write essays. Another one was IDAAY, the Institute for the Development of African American Youth, which has done incredible work with young people who don't have criminal records of any note, who are caught with a gun, and do not appear yet to be involved in driving gun violence. Mentoring, sports activities, other things that often fill gaps in what surrounds them and head them in a good direction. We also provided money for a Black Women in Sports Foundation and for a recovery organization that was dealing with addiction issues called Savage Sisters. Each of these organizations got a $25,000 grant from these civil asset forfeiture funds. It went back into the communities it came from. It went back for the purpose of pushing against gun violence and crime in those communities. And based on the accumulated funds that we have committed to distribute $1 million over the course of this year and have invited another round of applicants to apply to the Philadelphia Foundation, which is vetting the applicants and making sure that they're appropriate and also making sure that they comply and use the funds in proper ways. In terms of opportunities related to prevention, since September of 2019, the DAO's Community Engagement Unit has hosted its monthly one-stop job and resource hubs. These hubs have connected over 3,200 residents to employment, trauma care, victim services, and other social services, all in ways that tend to push against crime and provide other pathways. And we have also provided a trauma-informed response to terrible gun violence events. As you may know, we have a CARES program. I won't get into the details, but it's very, very important in terms of how it addresses the needs of families that have suffered a loss as a result of a homicide. I want to affirm the work of Reverend Myra Maxwell and the program's 13 peer crisis responders who are all co-victims of homicide. In a moment, I'm going to show a video that it's brief, but I think important. My office continues to prioritize support for victims, co-victims, and communities impacted by gun violence. We remain committed to fighting for justice for those harmed by senseless violence. And we will now briefly hear from Ms. Terry Jenkins, who lost her son, Tajon, last year.
Somebody get the voice on.
I realize we're having a technical issue. I'm going to continue with the presentation while my staff here tries to address them. They may have fixed it. Did we fix it? Nope. All right. Well, we'll try to come back to that. Building community trust is a necessary component in reducing crime, particularly gun violence, in the city of Philadelphia. The DA's office remains steadfast and proactive in restoring community and listening to all community residents, including young people. One of the ways that we need to build community trust, slide 8 please, is to protect generational wealth, often in the form of homes, holding the system accountable and listening to future leaders. Home ownership stabilizes communities, and we are all rightly proud of Philadelphia's record on home ownership, although it is slipping. Our economic crimes unit has taken very seriously the guidance of council members, many of them, including Councilmember Parker, on the importance of trying to protect home ownership. Our economic crimes unit has done remarkable work in this regard. It is supervised by ADA Dawn Holtz, pictured there in the background of this photograph, and also by ADA Kim Essick, who is at the podium in this photograph of a press conference we did. We have had recent arrests and charges both in March and May of 2021 related to illegal deed transfers of 24 houses in total, stolen from vulnerable people, which is what they do. This generational wealth was stolen from people in Mount Airy, Frankfort, Olney, North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia. These are by no means the only arrests that we have had. And we are very happy to say we've had remarkable cooperation and assistance coming from different agencies within the city to try to tighten requirements for presentation of a deed. Slide 9, please. For decades, Philadelphians have demanded accountability from government. The Special Investigations Unit is responding to this call for independent oversight to build community trust. Our Special Investigations Unit is headed by Supervisor ADA Tracy Tripp. It exists in large part for the purpose of keeping government actors accountable. Often, these are police officers, but it may include other public officials. The SIU has received over 400 tips amid the 2020 civil unrest. Tips about a variety of issues, some of them, though, being illegal police conduct, including potentially criminal police conduct. Those tips, in many cases, were tips that the public was not willing to provide directly to police, because, of course, it is somewhat daunting to think about calling the police to report one of their fellow members. And so we are happy to see that people are trusting this office enough to provide tips so that we can follow up. The SIU provides an independent place for residents to file complaints and make reports against figures of authority. Next slide, please. For decades, Philadelphians have demanded accountability from the DA's office, and they should, because we do not in America or in Philly just have an issue of police integrity. We have an issue of prosecutorial integrity, and the Conviction and Integrity Unit in Philadelphia has turned into a national leader in this form of accountability and community trust building. The Conviction and Integrity Unit, under the remarkable supervision of ADA Patricia Cummings, who moved here from Texas a few years ago to head the unit and had run a similar unit in a major city in Texas before that, has done tremendous work. Since 2018, over 1,600 cases have been submitted for review by our office. Some of them are nothing more than a handwritten letter on a single piece of paper from an inmate. Some of them come to us with 20 file boxes, carefully curated by senior attorneys, either at the Innocence Project or individual attorney or at another law firm. One of them was famously done by Mr. Alan Tauber, who is currently our acting public defender, and that was the case of Chester Holman, a case that he worked on essentially free for a decade, until what he contended turned out was completely true, which is that Mr. Holman, a completely innocent man, needed to be out of jail, and he got out of jail after 28 years during this administration. Mr. Holman is only one of 19 individuals who have been exonerated to date. These individuals were victims, and they were victims in many cases of either police or prosecution or both. Not following the law, not following the rules, and sadly in a few of these cases essentially conducting a kidnapping on paper, driven by a desire to win at all costs with little regard for innocence or guilt. They have served more than 400 years in prison collectively, and the people who committed the terrible crimes for which they were falsely accused got away with it, to endanger others and harm others. We are very proud of the trust that is being built based upon our Conviction Integrity Unit. Next slide, please. Treating kids like kids. We need to build a system that won't apply yesterday's mistakes to tomorrow's problems, and that starts with how we treat our kids. The Juvenile Unit continues to collaborate to create a new juvenile justice system that the community trusts. I would respectfully remind you that Mr. Listenby, who was a first assistant, was also Barack Obama's choice to run juvenile justice for the United States of America during his second term. And he, among many other remarkable attorneys in our office, including ADA Derek Holmes and ADA Jordan King, have done remarkable work. There has been a 33% reduction in the number of young people in pretrial detention since 2020. From 27 to 2020, the DAO was able to safely reduce the number of children in congregated care, many of them actually snake pit facilities, by over 80%. And the DAO has developed a variety of additional diversionary programs for youth, essentially doubling the availability of accountability for cases where it is appropriate without the necessity of an adjudication or basically a juvenile conviction. Before and during the pandemic, this is slide 12, please, the Community Engagement Unit has continued to serve as a bridge between the DA's office and communities across Philadelphia, especially our marginalized communities. The role of community engagement and the remarkable work of Supervisor G. Lamar Stewart, who is both a Philadelphia police officer and a pastor, and his unit staff cannot be understated. Its importance in growing trust, involving the community in ways that may lead us to positive outcomes and better ideas about how to address our issues cannot be underestimated. The unit attends dozens of meetings hosted by community groups and faith leaders each month. It hosts monthly virtual school listening sessions, creating a space for our office to listen to young future leaders and young people on issues of public safety and criminal justice reform. Sadly, sometimes these include going into schools where a child has been killed and where the students are reeling with the grief that goes with that. Number 13, please. Technology plays an important and a positive and ever-expanding role in our lives. It plays an ever-expanding and important role in criminal justice, as I think anyone who watched the George Floyd video will understand. Our office is committed to meeting the challenges presented by technological advancements, including, for example, the challenges presented by what I view to be a great benefit to criminal justice, which is body-worn camera footage. There is a tremendous need for our office to be able to thoroughly review, sometimes to locate, body-worn camera footage. And it may seem like a burden in the short run, but in the long run, the advantage of body-worn cameras to the whole system, once again, should not be underestimated. We avoid jury trials. We avoid them. They turn into other outcomes when we are able to thoroughly review body camera footage, locate it, provide it to the other side. Because, the truth is, body camera footage is extremely useful. It often tells most of the story, if not all of the story. And that can mean a case that is dismissed because our office sees that the camera footage does not confirm the event. Or it may be a case that's a guilty plea rather than a week-long trial because the footage itself leaves no doubt, and therefore the defense has no reason to go to trial in such a case. The use of technology is increasing in the courtroom, and the DA's office has to keep up with this. Our class 300-400 has been flat, while the use of technology like these cameras has grown very significantly. It is also important to note that many jurisdictions are shifting from paper-based prosecution to digital prosecution. We need technology resources for social media to address cell phones, body-worn cameras, and open file discovery. Slide 15, please. Staffing needs. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, there has been an enormous increase in cases within the system. This is unavoidable because the courts have effectively been closed since the middle of March of last year. Yes, there's been a trickle of cases going through, perhaps at times 10, 15. Maybe now we're up to something like a 25% case flow. The good news is we haven't doubled the caseload as we feared that we would. But the bad news is that we have cases that are incredibly important that we prosecute, and that we prosecute properly. It is impossible to do this in a scenario in which we are not adequately staffed. Co-victims of gun violence want a couple things. First and foremost, they want their loved one back. Sadly, the criminal justice system cannot do that. But what we can do is the second thing, and that is that we can provide accountability when people are arrested and when we are brought sufficient evidence to be able to win a case. We can try people and we convict the right people and make sure that innocent people don't take their place. Being fully staffed and equipped with the right technology for today and tomorrow, we can provide this to co-victims. Slide 16, please. Confronting institutional racism takes persistence, and I will continue to be persistent to confront racism, not just in courtrooms, but also within the office. Let me just give you a couple of pieces of data that I think speak to what we have tried to do in this office. When we came to the office, and this is an office of approximately 600 people, there were 72 black employees. There are now 170 black employees. It's an increase of 137%. When we came to the office, there were 35 black attorneys in the office. There are currently 55. We have already hired an additional 15 who will be starting in September. Before this administration ends, there will have been a 100% increase in the number of black attorneys in the office And the numbers for attorneys of color are very similar. There is no category in which we have not increased diversity by at least 100%, if not more, during this administration. And we have done so by reaching out to some of the most talented people you can imagine and persuading them that they should work in this office. Our primary hiring occurs in Philadelphia, and we go to the Philadelphia schools. This year, for example, most of our hires came from one of our great law schools, and that is Temple. But we have made hiring our top priority in this office, and therefore we have gone to all 6 HBCU law schools. We have hired from all 6 HBCU law schools, and we have gone to every one of the 20 top-rated law schools in the United States in addition, and including some of our Philadelphia schools. And so we have been hiring the most talented people, the most mission-driven people, the most hard-working people, the most talent that you can imagine. And we have simultaneously, we are proud to say, brought in people with amazing life experience who had prior careers and done things that make them very close to the people they serve. One comes to mind, a young man named Burnell Jackson. Mr. Jackson went into the military, did military intelligence, came out. He worked as a police officer in Prince George County. And after about 12 or 15 years of doing this, he went to law school at American University. Burnell Jackson is a star in our office, and he's a star because he understands all of the nuance and complexity that goes with his lived experience and also his professional experience. Those are the kind of people we need, and those are the kind of people that we are very, very proud to hire. We remain committed to this. We do not consider our work over in any way. The photograph that you are seeing here is a photograph of our September 2019 fall class of attorneys. They are in the community with some of the people from our community engagement unit on a tour. You may recognize a few people. They are at 15th and Susquehanna. You will see now Council Member Kendra Brooks. You will see Reverend Dr. Clarence Wright off to the right. Bilal Qayyum is here, and so is Taj Murdoch of Men of Courage. This was part of the initial training of attorneys we had brought into the office to make sure that they were not simply here, but they were in touch with the community and they understood the community through the mouths of community leaders and community members and community activists. For the reasons that I have mentioned previously, we are asking for our funding to be restored to the FY20 spend amount of approximately $42,500,000, which is approximately a $2 million increase from the FY22 proposed budget. I thank you for your attention and time, and I look forward to answering your questions. I am pleased to announce we're actually 1 minute ahead of where I had hoped to be.
Thank you, Mr. DA. Your time in this was appreciated. First of all, I want to congratulate you on your nomination yesterday. Look forward to your next 4 years and trying to work to enhance the lives of the citizens of the city of Philadelphia. Ms. T, I had a couple questions before I turn it over to my colleagues. One is the issue with respect to the caseloads. Just noticed that your targeted caseloads in FY22, which is significantly lower than the 21 caseload. The 81 and 2020, you had 70. Is there a reason why you think you're going to be able to reduce your caseload given the upward trends of violence in the city of Philadelphia? And kind of talk to me today how you're going to reduce the numbers.
Yes,
it would obviously be good. But
I'm happy to do that. First of all, I thank you for that. Congratulations. I truly look forward to working with every member of council, and as well as and you perhaps especially as council president, as we move forward. As far as I'm concerned, first term was 3.5 years. The next one is 4.5, and I look forward to having the opportunity to meet with any and all of you independently and talk about whatever it is that our office and I can do better in relationship with all of you. Second, sadly, there is not that high a volume of shooting cases that are actually solved. And I don't say that to put anybody under the bus, but I can tell you that the rate at which fatal and non-fatal shootings are solved in good times is about 20%, and in bad times it's more like 15 or 16%. So while we do see a lot of shootings, they do not necessarily, in fact they don't, most of them, come to us as a package presented by the police asking us to charge. The case load is not a case of criminal incidents. The case load is the load of cases that are actually in court. So while they are a factor and they are the most prioritized category of cases, along with things like first-degree felony rape, first-degree felony assaults of other types, it does not have a tremendous effect on the count of cases that we will have.
Why do you think we're going to be going down? That's my question. It's like you're projecting less cases based on your testimony.
Council President, may I see the slide? I just want my staff to put up the slide. I want to make sure I'm understanding the question, and I've been clear in my presentation.
We're talking about submitted.
And that's your target. So I'm just trying to understand why your target would be lower. And if there's something that, that's going to happen outside of traditional, that's a good thing.
Number of cases handled quarterly. Council President, I'm going to ask Mike Lee from my office to address it. I think he has a clearer explanation than I do right now.
Sure, no problem.
Good afternoon, Council President. Essentially, we have been seeing a decrease in the number of caseloads that the office has handled as we moved away from mass incarceration. Furthermore, treating substance use as a public health issue has led, to a drastic reduction in simple possession drug offenses through police-assisted diversion, through the decriminalization of small amount of marijuana with the city ordinance, and similar things with the CVNs for the protest cases. So that was about 1,000 cases that traditionally would have come in as misdemeanor caseload that is now not part of our caseload because it's handled in other ways. So we expect to see a continuation of that type of decriminalization and public health approach as we do fewer low-level offenses and focus more on the more serious offenses.
Okay, I got you. All right, that clears it. With respect to you talked about deed theft, and I want to thank you so much for what you've been doing on that. I know a number of members are very interested in that. The question with respect to the timeline is always an issue with everything. Government is government. We know it's always a challenge to move as quickly as people want. Is there a way, or do you anticipate being able to accelerate the resolution of this deed theft issue? This is really problematic for people, as you know.
Council President, thank you for that question. It is really problematic. The only limit that we have here, and it is a limit, is that we are very low on the number of DAs, detectives that we have. We have about 30 at this time. There was a time when this office had 100 DAs, detectives. That number has reduced over many, many years. And so I've been working with the commissioner requesting more DAs, detectives, because most of them are actually active Philadelphia police officers. They're not on the payroll of the district attorney's office. The commissioner was kind enough to allow the transfer of 4 DA's detectives over here. I presented the commissioner with another 9 and was hopeful that they would be shifted over here. But the last thing that the commissioner said when we spoke about it was that right now there were staffing issues and she was not sure, even though she had committed to providing additional DA's detectives, she was not sure she could do it. I told her at that time I will be more than happy to advocate that for every DA's detective you switch over to us so we can do this important kind of work, that the PPD should have that additional staffing replaced in funding, because I understand that is an issue. But the truth is I would love to be able to do 200 or 250 deed theft cases a year instead of work with a limited staff of DA's, detectives, and our talented attorneys who are doing this. If we could get a little more funding in that regard, and if we could also have the DA's, detectives transferred over, because that is the process, that would be a tremendous help.
Are the DA or any detective, be it DA or Philadelphia Police, or is that the only category of employee that is able to do this work?
Well, it is
alternative strategies on?
No, I mean, in general, we have seen an increasing level of capacity on the part of the PPD. It is the result of our DA's detectives training some of the detectives in what to look for and how to investigate it. We're seeing more of that, but the DA's detectives who specialize in this are the most equipped because they have the most experience and because they work in close connection to our two economic crimes supervisors who have access to certain databases and so on. We do have a meeting with Representative Bullock coming up where we will be exploring with her the possibilities for some changes in state law that will make it more difficult to perpetrate these crimes. Unfortunately, the state law is really geared to rural real estate brokers and their convenience in terms of not actually presenting signatories, for identification. But we are hopeful that we may get some relief in terms of Philadelphia being permitted to have rules that are more specific and appropriate for Philadelphia. Nevertheless, it's not going to end. I mean, we have recently arrested a ring of people who stole 15 houses. And unfortunately, there was a vacuum of accountability in the city and prior administrations that really needs to be closed, because this is a pretty terrible crime that's being done in the city of Philadelphia. We would be delighted, consistent with budgetary constraints, we would be delighted to expand this unit as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I know it's an issue. I know a former member, Councilman Bill Greenlee, this was his issue. He was on that deed theft issue in a very aggressive way. Today, you have impressive numbers as it relates to the increase of people of color in your department. Just saw that chart. Did not know that it was that level. But I do want to ask you a question about contracts. We in the city of Philadelphia are trying to be as aggressive as possible to ensuring that contracts to go to the MWDBE firms. Based on the statistics that we show with respect to your contracts in the district attorney's office, it's listed at only 4%. It's actually down from 9%. Can you explain that?
What I can tell you is that we believe it should be a priority. It's something that we are working on. We want to do better with it. And we are currently in the process of engaging with community-based contractors for diversionary programs. We believe that if those contracts come through, that will represent a significant improvement in the level of minority inclusion with our contracts. But, I think it's something that we can do better and that we should do better, not only in that context, but in others. With certain staffing, with certain budgetary requirements recently, it has not been the top priority. We were just trying to keep this ship afloat with chewing gum and, Scotch tape. But as we move into a period when the federal government actually is showing some care and concern for the city of Philadelphia, we are hopeful that we'll be able to improve that.
All right. I know you didn't mean the way it sounded. It's not an area of concern. I know you didn't mean it like that.
If I said that, what I mean is it is an area of concern. It is concerning.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misheard you. All right. I know it's no way you said that. Mr. DA, you referenced just now in your response, you talked about community engagement. We had this conversation the other day about having, and I shouldn't assume, the individuals that you work with, we work with out in neighborhoods, community-based groups that are doing a lot of the good work out there. And we talked about the fact that some of this should be structurally embedded in the city government so they wouldn't have to year to year ask for a grant. You can't build capacity if you have no sense of where you're going to be next year. Are you referencing the opportunities for some of these community-based organizations actually having contractual relationships with the DA's office? Is that what you're saying?
The most important thing to us is that the proper services and the proper forms of prevention are provided. Right. In a city that for many years struggled. I mean, it is not the best funded city in the world, and that's no criticism of the city. I love the city, but we want the services provided. To the extent that we can be a part of that solution, we're happy to do it, but we certainly know that the big solutions come from the city. They don't come from a DA's office with its much smaller budget.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, we're on the record of talking about possibly figuring out a way to get these folks, you know, structurally embedded in the government, and as opposed to this, you know, year to year, administration to administration, and whatever department that can help with this would be good for us, I think, in the long run, for a whole lot of different ways. Not only with our numbers, but in terms of the effectiveness of a lot of these groups that are out there doing this for zero right now. So, okay, thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over. I'll come back a little later. I'll turn it over. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I too like to congratulate you, Mr. District Attorney. I'm going to narrow my questions to a couple of topics. One earlier, I asked about bail in the city of Philadelphia, quoting you on asking for $1 million bail and receiving lesser bail, and how that correlation let more shooters on the street to return to their given occupation of shooting people. But I want to focus a little bit on that. But I want to talk about witnesses, because you cited in earlier testimonies about the need for witnesses to show up, be reliable, not be intimidated, and in some ways, sometimes, be relocated for their safety. Could you speak to those, Mr. District Attorney?
Yes, sir, and thank you for your kind words, Councilmember Jones. We had quite a campaign team, and I really appreciate all the support that we got. So it is very important that we do not expose witnesses, victims, co-victims to fear of retaliation or to actual retaliation. One of the real problems we've had with the pandemic is that the processing of cases came to a standstill. And this meant that people who were in a sensitive, vulnerable position have been exposed for a longer period of time. That fear can take hold, and I mean, simply put, actual retaliation can occur. So our office works very hard at relocation. It is not cheap. It often costs something on the order of $30,000 for a family. That's kind of an average number. And the relocation is partial. We're not actually talking about taking a whole family, moving them to Arizona, changing all of their identities. What we're talking about is usually something much more limited than that, because we don't have the resources of the feds. But we have been very vigorous about pursuing it. We have people who do it all the time. You know, I have taken a lot of phone calls, often from council members on the weekend or at night, when a constituent advises them that there's a concern, and we try to move as quickly as we possibly can on that. You know, we view that as being a very important part of what we need to do.
So we'd like to work with you and our counterparts at HUD to talk about housing that can be dedicated to witness relocation, used for a period of time, sold so that people don't get used to locations that are used for relocation. Also working with the Philadelphia Housing Authority or other housing authorities to do that, and would love to work with someone in your staff.
We would love to assist with that, partner with that any way that we can. First Assistant Listenby has been heavily involved with that, and he can, you know, if you would like the numbers on the funding that we get and how we use it, we're happy to provide that as well. But we would be happy to partner with you on that, council member. It sounds like a very worthy program.
So I want to thank you and your team. In times when it's difficult, when you hear about a murder, it got so bad for a period of time, Mr. District Attorney, when you called my cell phone, I was like Pavlov's dog. I got nervous. But your team, whether it was the man with 3 names, G. Lamar Stewart, Chance Lee, Bill Pritzker, and others, have been remarkable on those difficult times of being in communities, dealing with the issue of gun violence. So I wanted to publicly thank them. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Kimona Sanchez.
Good afternoon. I too want to congratulate you. I like the way you said it. The first time was 3.5 years. The next is 4.5 years. And you know how I feel about that. So congratulations. Question real quick, and I'm going to say to you what I said to the other independent elected officials, because I feel very strongly about this, that, you know, in council, we have to work with you to make sure that you have the budget that you need to comply with the mandate of the voters and that they have given to you. And as you know, we've been working at this over the last few years. COVID shifted a lot of things. So I'm going to go specifically to your request of $4.25 million, and you're saying that you're $2 million short of pre-COVID. Can you quickly explain to us what the $2 million investment will help you to do?
Council member, I'm going to call forward Cecilia Madden from my staff to delineate that. Should be right here.
Good afternoon. The $2 million would be
Put your name on the record, for the record.
Cecilia Madden, Director of Administration. Thank you. We're short about $2 million of our FY20 levels. That's about 1.3 in Class 100, another 500 or so thousand in Class 200, and 150,000 in Class 300, 400. So that would bring us back to FY20 levels. That would allow us to fill some vacancies that we've absorbed throughout the past year. It would allow us to do some cost of living adjustments, certainly some merit increases for people who've been putting themselves at risk throughout the entire pandemic, being, working on site in our office, in court, in the community, at the juvenile detention center, et cetera. So that's the breakdown for the roughly $2 million that we are short.
So you're saying that there are positions that you chose not to fill during the COVID that were being assumed by other people. And so have you ever been denied the ability to hire someone when needed through the finance office, or have you been able to work through the COVID emergency?
We have been able to work through it. We, put people into grant funded positions. We, try to absorb our personnel costs that way. We have hired people into grant-funded positions, hired people external from the office. We have gotten no pushback from the budget office in terms of requesting new positions, which has been really helpful. We have had to hire additional headcount in support staff and in attorneys to fill very critical vacancies, like a supervisory roles for our federal litigation unit and for our IT unit. And the budget office was very cooperative and pushed those positions through.
So when you were not granted the $2 million, have you guys officially submitted to the finance office saying the shortfall and its impact?
We submitted the cut scenarios that were requested. We also submitted a modest request for additional funds. We can follow up with the budget office to formalize the match to FY20 levels.
Is any of this money carryover from before? Because I know in the past when we had some of the challenges around carryover allowance about utilization of it. That's not the case in this. This is all new money.
This is all new money.
But it's going back to your fiscal 20 pre-pandemic funding level.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me get the DA back.
Council member, thank you for those questions. I do want to be clear that we went a very long period of time not filling attrition. We initially had an enormous budget cut of 20%, and council has been extremely thoughtful and gracious in making sure that as we fell way behind, because that was a completely unsustainable budget, that we got the funds we needed to carry through. But part of the deal that we were able to work during the pandemic was really an unsustainable crisis deal, where we would have attrition and not fill it. And that's what we did for quite some time. With the election of a new president, we knew that better times were coming. And, we are aware that the law allows us to hire without limitation. We're aware of that, but obviously we're trying to work with all entities in the city. We recognize that it was a crisis, not just for us, but for everyone. And so, it's what happened during the pandemic, simply put, is not sustainable. We are short-staffed as it is right now, but that's why we are looking backward to that prior level of, I wouldn't say, generous, but I would certainly say sufficient funding that we had before the pandemic.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I'd like to go, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to hear some of the conversations earlier today from the courts as they reopen. And, we've been talking a lot about the systemic racisms in all the different structures, fees, fines, all the bureaucratic stuff that we do to poor people, not realizing, and the system did this for many, many, many years. As we move forward and moving out of the pandemic, what are the 1, 2, 3 things that concern you as we open up your courts with our ability to move through these cases that we should be aware of from your perspective?
Are we speaking around issues of race, or are we speaking just more generally?
I think systemic. I think that there has been, for a long time, there's been this sense of we have these fines, these fees. Many of the, systems have been allowed to use this money for general operating. We are now at a different time and place where we're saying that no one should be denied due process because they can't fill out an application, don't have access to a lawyer, or the ability to pay a fee. What is your concern as the courts ramp up again of issues that we should be aware of as we want to ensure people due process?
Thank you for the question. Well, one of the issues which we have actually been looking at during the entire administration is exactly what you've noted, which is that some of our diversion programs, for example, some of our supervisions or treatment programs require all kinds of fees and costs that broke people can't pay. And so rather than people getting into a particular diversionary program, being accountable in ways that don't include a conviction, and then being able to move on, what happens is their case remains open, literally, in some cases. Why? Because they weren't able to pay, an $800 fee or a $225 fee. One of the ways we have tried to address that, but it's not ideal, is we've tried to address it by using our power to drop cases, sometimes rather than go into a formal diversionary program where the courts are requiring all kinds of fines and costs. If we have, for example, a person who has been using drugs, who is charged with possession of drugs, and we say to them that today is your court date, you and your lawyer go make contact with treatment, get us a valid letter back saying what kind of treatment you've done, we'll drop it in court. Our power to drop it in court exists without requiring fines and costs, right? Sometimes we even have judges whose hands are tied because state law requires them to use the system to extract money, which then goes to state funds, things of that sort. So we have tried in many different ways, including working with some think tanks, to see under Pennsylvania law how we could get out from under some of these fines and costs that do more harm than good to poor people. And we've had to be creative, and we will continue to do that. Some of the other concerns that we have as the courts open, obviously, are that we have witnesses who are afraid to go out. We have witnesses who are worn out. We're going to see high numbers of cases in courtrooms. We're going to have to be well prepared to do these cases. It's not going to be easy to pick juries because not everybody wants to be on a jury right now and sit close to not everybody wants to ride SEPTA. Imagine a court system where the people who ride public transit can't participate because they're afraid to get on public transit due to the existence of a pandemic. It's potentially a system that really works against poor people and also black and brown people who may be black. So these are all concerns that we have forward, and we really forward to working with judicial leadership. There is some new judicial leadership now, and so far we've enjoyed a really excellent relationship with them, and we're looking forward to working with them to try to open courts fully as society opens and handle these challenges.
We'll continue this line of questioning on the second round. Council President Clark asked that question directly of the court system around the efficiencies around virtual, right, to eliminate some of this stuff. So we're going to be following that very closely because we definitely don't want to see a laundry list of continuance and just cases being listed for the purpose of saying they were listed. again, that becomes, a violation of people's rights and time as and cost, right? It's systems cost. So thank you very much, Council President. I'll wait around for the next round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Parker, I want to apologize. I was supposed to tee you up early on per our conversation earlier. Councilman Johnson, if it's okay. I know Councilwoman Parker had another. Councilwoman Parker.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Let me start, DA, by also saying congratulations to you, but I want to begin where both you and Council President ended. Council President questioned about it, and you talked about it in your testimony. Last month, your office, the Economic Crimes Unit, in partnership with the Police Department's Major Crimes Unit, arrested an individual who's accused of deed theft of 14 properties and related offenses, and Mr. DA, that 8 of those properties were in the 9th Council-matic district. And I wanted to, for the record, because we hear when things are wrong, but I wanted to thank the Assistant District Attorney, Kimberly Esack, and Kimberly, if I chopped up your name, charge it to my head and not my heart, and Mike Lee, who has been working with us on issues associated with criminal justice reform long before it became popular during my tenure when I was in the State House. Mr. DA, your office, along with my office, and there have been many others, are active participants in the Philadelphia Bar Association's fraudulent conveyance task force. And I want to state for the record that in your testimony just now, you talked about that DA's detective training, getting the most, experienced detectives that will assist in investigating these economic crimes. I want to go on record as saying I wholeheartedly support that. We need more arrests and prosecutions of deed fraud, and we also, when we will, thanks to Council President Clark on the front end, work on more prevention via our neighborhood preservation initiative, and then the outstanding work of our Register of Wills along with our Records Department and addressing the tangled title issue. With that being said, Mr. DA, can you do me a favor? Because what I want to show is not only are Black and brown communities disproportionately impacted by criminal activity taking place in the city of Philadelphia and homicides, but when we look at where the economic crimes are taking place, we will see them being victimized many times over. So can you GIS for us where all of the economic crimes have been prosecuted and tell us the type, and do that by council district? And if it's possible for you to compare with us what that was like during the prior administration, can you technically do that?
Councilmember, I think we can. I just want to be clear, Councilmember, are we speaking of deed theft specifically or all kinds of economic crime?
All of those crimes that have come under economic crimes, because a lot of crimes associated with our seniors is the caretakers taking care of them, but they're financially abusing them at the same time and taking their money. And I would argue that we didn't have in prior administrations a very robust economic a focus on economic crimes unit, right? Because it wasn't a sexy thing to prosecute. But finally, we're starting to really take it seriously. So I want us to see how we've been faring under your administration versus the prior administration. Is that possible?
Yes, Councilmember. We have a grant-funded data group here, and I think they can dig in and do that. And I appreciate the invitation. We'll get on that right away.
Thank you. And if it was possible to figure out how many of them were also senior victims, that would also be helpful, because we would be able to connect them and know where to target certain services. So I appreciate that. In addition to that, you don't have it now, but I remember the first time I saw it when you were working on attempting to diversify the office. You GIS for us all of the colleges where you had recruited across the country. And we are right now working extremely hard to, diversify our Philadelphia Police Department. We passed the residency requirement, but I want to see where your office has recruited those who've been interested in criminal justice, so that we can also, ensure that some of those same strategies are being employed for our police department. So can you forward that information to the president as well?
Yes, we can, council member. Those are law school students, of course, but we're happy to do that. We do actually have a lot of college graduates or college students who come to the office. Often the college graduates will come work with us for 2 or 3 years, and then they will go into law school, or they'll go into some other, profession or some other occupation. They tend to find us rather than our finding them, and often they are from this area, from some of the great schools that we have in this area. But in terms of the active recruiting, we'll be happy to provide the list of all of the law schools where we have been actively recruiting. Obviously, we do accept applications from everywhere and anywhere, but we'll be happy to provide that list.
My final 2 questions that I definitely need to get on the record, because I have some people in the community who are listening right now. I want to give you a hypothetical, and I want you to tell me what will happen. If you were near Temple Road in Philolina, if you were near Alney Plaza in Alney, if you were off of Rising Sun Avenue, where we've been having a significant amount of crime taking place, residents will tell you that I've called my council person in the police department to talk about, a number of folks who have sort of just, taken hold of a particular corner, or they're at a particular house on the block. Marijuana now, it's all day long. I'm afraid, and I want you to put yourself, most of these people who are calling me, D.A. Krasner, these are seniors. And the first thing we do when this happens is we call, I don't care if it's the 2nd, the 35th, or either the 14th. I mean, I've gone out and walked with officers, walk with captains, and went on corners and said, listen, here's, my number, my email, text me, call me, need help with a resume, need help with a job, let us know. We've had some of our credible, communicators, communicating with folks who are not that far removed from where some folks are. What response do I give to the senior who says to me, Sherelle, I can't sit on the steps. I'm on oxygen. Marijuana is being smoked, right here, just constantly all day. I'm taking care of the grandkids. I don't even want them to be able to come outside. What kind of response do I give when we've sent, city agencies, services, a lot of the re-entry? What kind of response do I give? And then they say, we call the police and nothing happens.
So just so we are clear, this office has not prosecuted possession only of marijuana. We prosecute dealing marijuana all the time. And the police are well aware that we prosecute essentially every marijuana dealing case. We understand that in the current state of law in Pennsylvania, the solution I think a lot of people expect, which would be recreational adult use marijuana in a controlled way, the same way that we have the state store system. We expect that is coming. There seems to be bipartisan support with both Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature, and for using it as a source of taxation to benefit public schools, things of that sort. Some of that will eliminate some of these issues. But I just want to be very clear. If any police officer who says the DA's office does not prosecute dealing of marijuana is not telling the truth. We prosecute it all the time. We prosecute it in every case where there is evidence to support it, and we will continue to do that until there is a change in the law.
Okay, so I want to get these last 2 on the record, and I also need you to clarify this for me. So you're telling me that if the senior calls me because she wants to sit on her porch, and her neighbor, who is not selling marijuana, but her neighbor decides to sit on the porch, with his friends, and they smoke marijuana there nonstop, I have to tell the senior, because they are not selling marijuana or dealing marijuana and they are only using it, there is nothing that law enforcement can do. If I say that, am I giving the right answer?
Respectfully, no. That's not the correct answer. First of all, the police have been and continue to give CVNs, which is a civil violation notice for people who are in possession of marijuana, something that began before our administration started. But second, what you are describing goes beyond the mere possession of marijuana. What you're actually describing is acting in a way that is disturbing a neighbor by proximity, by doing this publicly in a way that is blowing smoke in the direction of someone who, for example, has impaired breathing. And that falls within other criminal categories. That could be something like disorderly conduct. It could be something like obstructing the highway. If police tell people to leave and they won't leave, then that can even rise to the level of a misdemeanor disorderly conduct. So the process you're describing there, the activity there, goes well beyond simply possessing marijuana, and there are legal remedies in terms of potential arrest and prosecution.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your leeway. DA, I want to leave you with these questions on the record. If you can get a quick answer, and that would be great. If you have to do it on the second round, that's fine. We talked last year about forward-thinking collaboration with the police department and the DA's office, where you would embed prosecutors in different police districts. Give us an update on what that is. Next, in terms of that collaboration, we talked about embedding a DA data analyst in the police department. So give us an update on where we are with both of those. And thank you, Mr. President, for your leeway.
Thanks.
So, thank you, Council Member. I appreciate that question. We continue with our assistant DAs. These are prosecutors who are actually working in the detective divisions, 6 detective divisions, 2 each. That is 12 people. It's been very positive in a number of ways, although the pandemic has interfered to some extent. But there is an increasing level of trust between police and these prosecutors, which is positive. It has become an excellent way for us to get a lot of intelligence, and that intelligence feeds our internal intelligence unit. It has aided the police in various ways in terms of facilitating, for example, they're expediting getting an answer on a warrant or something of that sort. And, we feel that has been a very positive situation. I don't know exactly where we are with the civilian data analyst, although I do know that our data team, which is 15 people, has regular meetings with the police department, and there's quite a bit of exchange of data and a great relationship of trust there that, initially didn't exist. Of course, we didn't even have a data team at first, but it's grant funded. They're doing a good job, and I have to say the PPD has done an excellent job of hiring civilian data analysts who we feel are, acting in good faith, working with us in good faith. So that seems to be going well, but I don't have a precise answer for whether we have a data analyst embedded. Does anybody on my staff have that answer yet? We do not yet. That is something that we look forward to doing.
Thank you. Thank you, DA. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, District Attorney Crabtree, for being here. And as everyone else has said, thank you. We congratulate you on your victorious win yesterday, mandate as well. And so a couple of my questions, zeroing on issues I always like to focus on, the issue of gun violence. And one, I want to get an idea of the level of progress that have been made with the new task force review team with the Philadelphia Police Department. I know it started on December the 7th. We're now in May. Obviously, level of issue of gun violence is a key issue that we all are addressing here in the city of Philadelphia. The only way we want to address it and reduce it and eliminate it is all of us addressing it collectively. So can you give us an update on the review team? Also, do you have dedicated funding in this budget request or plans to increase your support for your gun violence task force to help us track down where these illegal guns are coming from that are flooding the streets of Philadelphia? And then last but not least, in a totally different area, has your administration thought about looking at prosecuting individuals around illegal dumping as a matter of environmental justice, or maybe looking at, I have an interest in hopefully getting you and the Philadelphia Police Department and a couple other environmental groups together around the table to begin looking at the issue of illegal dumping all throughout the city of Philadelphia, which is rise to the point of a level of urgency in terms of bringing down the quality of life of our neighborhoods. And also, I just want to acknowledge your community engagement worker, Detective G. Lamar Stewart, who's been on the phone with me on many nights when these homicides and shootings are taking place, and Mike Lee for working with my staff around policy and legislation. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, council member, and thank you for your kind words for both G. Lamar Stewart and Mike Lee, who are sitting about 3 feet away from me on where you can't see them. That's how they are. Slipping me notes for when I goof up. But anyway, they're right here, and I appreciate your acknowledging them. In terms of dumping, I know that this was a focus and that we did some press around it because we had ramped up some of the enforcement around dumping as of probably 18 months ago. I have not had an update myself in a recent period of time. But my understanding from ADA Leandro Rataco, who just walked into the room, is that it's still going on and it's still at an elevated level compared to prior administrations. And we are happy to meet and see what we can do further. I can only imagine the pandemic's probably made that situation worse for a whole lot of reasons that we all understand. In terms of the task force, council member, I've been a little sloppy with my language, so I think what you're referring to is the group of senior PPD officials and senior people from our office who meet weekly to look at cases. That has been a very, very successful engagement with PPD. As I may have explained on another occasion, one of the first things that they found was a small flaw in the system, which is, they looked at 80 cases. They found about 19 cases where the DNA was taken from the gun, but no swab was taken from the defendant. And that, of course, was the purpose, to match the gun to the defendant. To the credit of the PPD, they immediately remedied it for those cases, and they put in action what was necessary to make sure that captains and other supervisors would ensure that the work got done. We, on the other hand, agreed to be as available as we could to immediately approve warrants, because a warrant was necessary for taking a cheek swab or otherwise obtaining DNA from a defendant. So that was one early example. Two of the ways in which we continue to work with them, and I'm looking forward to more progress as we move forward, are in terms of looking at social media immediately after people are caught and before they're released, before they have an opportunity to erase it. We want to see what we can do there, and I have to credit the PPD for doing a good job with limited resources in that regard. But it is so important because often we have cases that are okay, but they're really not home runs. And for us to be able to go to social media and obtain from social media crucial evidence that may show involvement in a shooting or the actual carrying of a firearm in question is just essential. So that's something we continue to work with PPD to improve as much as we can. And then, of course, there are issues around phones. And part of this relates to forensics. I won't go too far down that road other than to say I'm still a champion of PPD having the resources it needs to really dig into phones. I mean, the fact is, I wouldn't want to invade Councilmember Jones's personal space here, but everybody knows that what is in a cell phone tells all kinds of information. Even the United States Supreme Court, who you would think have pretty ordinary lifestyles, even the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized unanimously the high level of privacy in those phones. Why am I telling you this? Because you need warrants. In order to get into phones, you need warrants. And to the extent we are able to get people with that burner phone before it's thrown away, we're able to get that warrant right away, we're able to get in that phone right away, we may find incredibly important things in a city that is struggling to solve shooting cases of all types. So those are some of the things we continue to work on. There's a lot of just sort of like, really nitty-gritty details about livestock and how we can do livestock better, things of that sort that go on. But I consider it a very, very successful collaboration, and I think the commissioner would probably agree with that.
And those efforts are all in the effort to make sure that proper evidence is, I guess, provided to you and your team for a successful prosecution, correct?
It is, yes, it is. It's also to make sure we got the right person. Because when there's 4 kids in a car and there's 1 gun, we want to make sure we got the right person. That's essential to our task as well. We recognize that police are not going to be able to solve all crimes. There's no way they can. We recognize some cases are going to come in with weak evidence, and there's nothing that we or police can do about it. But what we want to do is make sure that we absolutely maximize the available evidence for each case, not just so that we can obtain a conviction, but also so we can make sure we have the right people, we fully understand the big picture. I can think of particular evidence grabs that we've done over the last few years that took a shooting case and turned it into 5 homicides. One piece of evidence that gave us that. And that is incredibly important. That's the kind of work that we love to do with the PPD. We want to work with them closely on that. So that's part of what we hope by adding some forensic capacity, but also this process. If they're telling us what they think we can do, we're telling them what they might be able to do better in supporting them. We just hope that, we get to the point where we have a city that is solving some of these shootings at a higher rate. At a higher rate, we want to.
And my last question as I wrap up, and I think I asked this maybe about a year ago. So is your team at the table with the administration's, I guess, it's Office of Violence Prevention? There's a meeting with probation, parole. I think DHS. They meet on either weekly or a monthly basis. Is your team a part of that strategy as we look at not just gun violence, but violence in the city of Philadelphia as a whole, an intricate part of that strategy?
The short answer is yes. We deal with OVP all the time, and not just in terms of GBI, which is essentially a form of focused deterrence in the city, but we have, constructive and frequent.
We do have focused deterrence running here in the city of Philadelphia?
Well, despite what you may have heard recently from source of information that wasn't always correct, yes, indeed, there is gun violence intervention, which is a form of focused deterrence in the city of Philadelphia. We have frequent meetings, a lot of communication with DHS. Could it perhaps be more structured? Perhaps, and we're willing to work on that. We hope to interact as much as we possibly can collaboratively with other agencies.
All right, I'm going to wrap up, and I just want to commend your team. Information I didn't know until we had the special committee on gun violence last hearing is that y'all are going in schools and talking to our young people. And that provides to give them a sense of hope that they could be more than what they may see in their immediate neighborhood. So just want to, y'all should talk about that more from a trauma standpoint. It's something that's needed in our Philadelphia school system as well as our charter schools, which are actually the number one institutions that have young people who have been shot and or murdered. So you have more young people being shot and murdered in charter schools than you have in traditional public schools. And so just want to say hats off to your team from that aspect, and it's something that hopefully we can be supportive of and is talked about more as we move forward. Thank you, Council President, for your latitude. District Attorney Larry Krasner, congratulations again, and let's keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Councilmember. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. And like many of my colleagues said, congratulations, District Attorney Larry Krasner. In the sense of time, I'm not going to be too long because we've been at this all day so far. Your presentation was very informative. My colleague asked some great questions, so most of my questions have already been asked. My first question is about the exoneration unit. I am aware of a number of different cases and situations where people are growing somewhat anxious. I think that the work that's been done has been novel work thus far, but I think what it does is now starting to buzz, and and folks are starting to get anxious because we know that we have people who have been wrongfully incarcerated, and these are incidents that have happened 20 or 30 years ago. So if you could just take maybe 15 to 30 seconds to talk about what's going on with that unit. I know you talked about it in your PowerPoint, but how does your ask, as far as the number you're asking for in your budget, relates to the work that's being done there in that unit specifically?
Our ask, well, let me be quick. So the work we've done, I must say, I think is tremendous, and it gives people hope, and it makes them trust that there is some fairness in the system, which is incredibly important at many levels. But when you give people hope, they get hopeful. And so we have increasing levels of people requesting review of their cases to see whether those cases have integrity. You can see 561 cases in 18, 804, in 19. And as we grind through them, having a staff that grew in a prior administration from basically 1.5 attorneys to what is close to 10 attorneys now, as we grind through them, it's just a ton of work. We would love to be able to do more and to do it more quickly. We recognize the times we are in. We have not asked for a bunch of additional money to do that. But I'll tell you right now, if we had another $1 million, we could staff that with several more attorneys and they could move a lot more quickly. I do understand the anxiousness. We need to have experienced attorneys to review these cases. And, obviously, we also need experienced attorneys to handle our most sensitive cases in a courtroom. So we have not actually asked for a bunch of money to increase it, but we would be delighted if City Council was able to find a way that they could provide additional funding, because we would like to see those cases move forward more expeditiously.
Thank you. I think, for me, I just, and maybe it's just personal experiences, I have a number of families who've just been reaching out to me about this. And I mean, D.A. Krasner, you know that I've reached out to your office about this issue, about people who are constantly pushing me and forcing me to push your office as it relates to this. So I do appreciate the work. But at the same time, in the midst of, trying to continue to be better for the citizens of Philadelphia, I do think we have a lot more to do. And, I want to continue to push this area as well. I do want to go to another line of questioning, similar to what my colleagues talked about, Councilmember Parker as well as Councilmember Johnson, just specific anecdotes and stories around gun violence and crime and scenarios where people feel like that our city is operating in a space of lawlessness. You just, a lot of us are congratulating you. You just ran a tough campaign. A lot of money was spent to send out certain messages and information. And I'm wondering, now that a lot of that is over, what are we going to do to combat some of that messaging? I'm extremely concerned as it relates to where we are as a city, as we're going into the summer. Anybody who's from Philadelphia knows that the summertime is always when an exclamation point goes on activity that we've seen leading up to the summertime. So what can we do around messaging, narratives? What can we do to maybe have focus groups, conversations? How can we better control narratives around what we're doing around crime and criminal activity in the city?
I understand your point. Well, for a long time, I was hopeful that there would be kind of a united front with the police commissioner and the mayor, for example, and we would have press conferences weekly that would address these issues. I am still open to that, and that is why that's one of the reasons why we started doing our own weekly press conference, in which on Mondays, every single Monday, we cover the gun violence that has happened in the prior week. I did that and offered an invitation to the police commissioner and also the mayor for them to join us at any time. And I'm glad to say that, there's some of that going on. But, especially with a new presidential administration, I think it would be very helpful if everyone would accept my invitation that the U.S. Attorney and the PPD and the mayor and the Attorney General all come together and present a united message on a regular basis about what we're doing. The fact is, we do the work. A nearly 85% conviction rate on shooting cases is very high by both Philadelphia and national standards, especially when it's done with integrity. And it is. But I am actually hopeful, now that this primary is over, that some of the motivation for putting out certain kinds of messaging is gone. I'm hopeful that people are willing to deal with the issues as they really are, and that we can get past that. Everybody can press reset. We can get past that, and we can work together more effectively, because some of that motivation will be gone.
Thank you. What I'll say is, that's something that I'm extremely concerned about, and I think one of the things that I know I'll offer myself up, and I think that we all have to do collectively, is to do something around what we're doing as it relates to our effort, not just specifically to combat this issue of gun violence. I think that communication is happening and people are starting to hear it, but we got to start to see even more transparency. So another thing that I have heard recommended in the midst of Councilman Johnson's special committee on gun violence hearings, we talked about technology and social media and things like that. So the monitoring of social media, and then some of the messaging around what we're doing to monitor social media, because the trauma that happens when people commit a crime and then they go on social media and brag, like that really is impacting the retaliation. So if people understood some of the things that were going on, maybe it could limit some of that. But then also on the communication and transparency side, and again, in the midst of thinking about this messaging stuff, I do think that we have to find a way to win that battle, because right now I do feel like we're losing it, and the summer is going to be here very soon. So I just want to keep pushing you, your office, all of us involved to rethink and think about what we're doing around transparency. And then the last thing I'll say to close out, if someone was looking for the places in the city that has the most criminal activity outside of some of these creative apps, like we need more readily available information. And I know you say you do the press conferences, but we also need more readily available information so we are aware of, you know, the criminal activity that's taking place, but then also the outcomes. Because often when we're talking about criminal activity, we hear when it first takes place, there's no arrest. And I know you do the weekly press conferences, and sometimes that communicates some of the bigger incidents that happen. But again, more transparency, and how can we figure out, like, this is a high crime area, and this is specifically what we're doing to combat some of the crime we see in this high crime area. I know that was a lot. You don't have to respond, District Attorney Krasner, because I know we're pressed for time and colleagues want to go for a second round. But I'm really going to just keep pushing this issue because, again, a lot of us care about the gun violence thing. And I think part of it is tangible things that we need to do. But another part of it is a narrative that's out there that we really need to find our way to combat. Some of it is fictional, some of it isn't. But the fictional stuff, I think we could do something about. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, District Attorney Krasner.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gimm. Councilwoman Gimm. One more time, Councilwoman Gimm. All right, we'll go on to Councilwoman Sanchez, and somebody can track the Councilwoman down. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gimm. I'm sorry, Sanchez. Everybody go. Where's everybody? Councilwoman Canona Sanchez. I know you're here. Councilwoman, you still here? Okay. All right. Well, you all are witnesses. I've called multiple times. People can always reach you offline, as you've indicated. So there's some additional questions. But we still have the Defenders Association to go today, so I want to get this on. So, DA, again, thank you, congratulations, and we look forward to working with you. We're all in this together. Time to move forward and get it done. You know, people are depending on us big time. So, thank you.
Council President, for those kind words. I look forward to visiting with all members of council individually and trying to figure out what we can do better and how we can be in relationship and how we can reset and do a better job together. I really appreciate the questions, and I appreciate you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, DA. Next up, we're going to have the Defenders Association. Okay, Mr. Tauber. Hey,
yes, I'm here, Council President.
I see somebody else is here. Good,
we're always at our post over here.
Good afternoon. Okay, if you're connected, we're going to just state your name for the record and please proceed with your testimony.
Very well. My name is Alan Tauber. Good afternoon, Council President Clark and distinguished members of Council. My name is Alan Tauber. I am the acting chief of the Defender Association of Philadelphia. As many of you know, our former chief, Keir Bradford Gray, stepped down in April of this year. I was selected and agreed to lead the agency while our board conducts its search for her successor. For those council members who have not had the pleasure of formally meeting before today, let me say that this opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the Defender is really very special to me. I started my career here at the Defender 24 years ago before joining the city's private bar, and then returned to the office to serve as first assistant at the request of Chief Bradford Gray. And so I'm excited and honored to guide the Defender through this transition and build upon the foundation Chief Bradford Gray laid for the Defender to serve and be seen as the largest and most skilled neighborhood criminal defense law firm in the city. Joining me today is Carolyn Jester, our Chief Financial Officer, Lori Mack, our Deputy Defender, and Everett Gillison, our Chief Administrative Officer. As you know, this time last year, in response to COVID-19, our court operations were largely suspended by court order. This closure, understandably and quite dramatically, impacted case processing. The closing of the courts brought our justice system to an unprecedented grinding halt. But while the various ways for cases to exit the system were blocked, arrests did not stop, and new cases continued to enter the system. This imbalance resulted in approximately 12,000 more open cases in April of 2021 than there were open in April of 2019. To give you some context, in April of 2019, a fairly typical pre-pandemic month, the criminal legal system resolved 4,916 cases. In April of 2020, it resolved 54 cases. Court operations have slowly resumed, but COVID-19 protocols have severely limited case processing in the Philadelphia courts. Today, courts are addressing cases at about 50% of their pre-pandemic pace, which means the backlog of cases has simply continued to grow. Under current conditions, the system struggles to keep pace with new arrests. As you can see, new cases continue to outpace disposals throughout 2020 and into 2021, putting us deeper into what can best be described as case debt. I don't have to tell you that all of the criminal legal system stakeholders are facing a daunting amount of work. This is particularly true for my office. We represent 70% of all people charged with criminal offenses in the city and 1 in 5 of all homicide cases. What this means for defender services depends in large part on how many new arrests are made each month and how quickly avenues open for cases to exit the system. Our current estimate, based on now a year's worth of data, suggests we will need to close 2,312 cases per month, about 100 more per month than the 2020 average, just to keep pace with new assignments. But eliminating the backlog will require our staff to close on average 4,300 cases per month for the rest of this year, nearly double the average monthly cases we closed in 2020. With our current staffing reduced 4% last year due to COVID-19 budget cuts, our staff is obviously looking at a significant increase in everyday workload. Though it will mean an even heavier burden upon reopening in June and into the foreseeable future, we remain committed to expediting our clients' cases. Additional delays in addressing these cases have very real and severe adverse impacts on our clients and their families, especially as so many Philadelphians are still reeling from the devastating economic impacts of the pandemic. They literally cannot afford to have pending charges hanging over their heads. Waiting for trials to resume is even more life-threatening for our incarcerated clients, who face difficult and sometimes dangerous conditions in the jails due to the rising prison population and ongoing Despite the limitations COVID-19 safety protocols placed on the operations of the court, our office continued to prepare our cases. New clients were interviewed and connected to services. Investigations went on. Bail and detainer motions were litigated daily. And we helped create and staff remote hearings in both family court and the adult criminal courts. Improved communications with our clients also became a top priority. We were able to restructure our client interviews to expand early bail review, ensuring that all incarcerated clients are assigned to be interviewed within 3 business days of their arrest. We developed a remote interview system and an online Ask a Defender form, which will likely remain an option for our clients to continue to use after the restrictions of the pandemic lift. We established a municipal court hotline that was staffed with attorneys every day to answer and respond to questions and concerns from our clients and their families. We also updated our phone system to effectively triage and respond to the thousands of calls we received each week. Some units, like probation and our probation and alternative sentencing unit, continued with little interruption. Our technological investments allowed staff from that unit to interview incarcerated clients in advance of their probation hearings remotely from the courthouse and provide real-time, individualized information to judges on the bench. Other units, like our Children and Youth Justice Unit, found creative ways to divert cases that did not require a criminal justice system response away from the court system. Our attorneys provided individualized social history information to the district attorney's office and piloted a new community-based pretrial support system for youth at the time they needed it most. And that was done at no cost to the courts or any other city agencies to support the initiative. Our emergency petitions in the heart of the COVID pandemic and expedited hearings in the spring were successful in decarcerating the jail. Over 1,470 people were released as a result. Although the jail population has been steadily rising since reaching the historic low on May 8th of 2020, the situation that we see today would have been far worse if not for the success of the program in reducing the population last year. Now that the people released during that program last year, now that the people have been released for over a year, we can confidently say the effort to decarcerate the jail did not have an adverse impact on public safety. We closely followed the outcomes of our clients who were released, and we observed rearrest rates. We observed that the rearrest rates were consistent with those historically reported in other reentry contexts in the city, despite the particular economic hardships faced in the city this year. If there is some small silver lining in the pandemic, it is that we have proven that with careful collaboration among the justice partners, prison population can be controlled without any enhanced risk to public safety. Continuing to build our community partnerships enables us to achieve the best possible outcomes for our clients. This year, while many of our partnerships moved away from in-person events and into the virtual space, we learned these relationships are here to stay. Participatory defense, brought to the city by Keir Bradford Gray, is a dynamic community-driven model and provides support for people facing criminal charges. The participatory defense hubs continue to help people who've been arrested and their families navigate the criminal legal system throughout the pandemic. All but 2 of the 8 hubs throughout the city now meet weekly to support clients. And despite the limitations on in-person gatherings, our community partnership coordinator has facilitated the installation of 2 additional hubs in this city, which are expected to launch later this year. Similarly, our pre-entry partnership, a network of community-based agencies that provide support to people who have been arrested, has become a model alternative to a cash bail system. Over 35 agencies have signed formal partnership agreements and nearly 50 organizations attend our bi-monthly partnership meetings. These organizations are all working to be part of a solution that hold people accountable without unnecessarily saddling them, often from communities of color, with the lifelong burden of a criminal conviction. Restorative response. The criminal charges filed against those who participated in last year's protests over the killing of unarmed black people provided a unique platform to highlight our commitment to reducing racial inequity in the criminal legal system. The defender has worked with private members of the bar, Troy Wilson and Paul Hetznecker, to develop the restorative response program for the civil unrest cases. Those who participate in the program, nearly all of whom are young people of color, will exit the system free of felony convictions that would otherwise have shut off all manner of professional, educational, and business prospects in their young lives. Because we represent over 500 of the people charged in these cases, the defender has taken the lead in making the restorative response program a reality. We anticipate the overwhelming majority of participants will complete the program and be eligible for automatic expungement of their arrests before the end of the summer. We know that we as criminal legal state system stakeholders stand at a crossroads. Our city is hurting, and I would be remiss not to acknowledge the suffering people who have been impacted by increased violence in the city have experienced. I will not pretend we don't have a daunting job before us. But we also know this is not a time to cut corners or to return to short-sighted policies that data and history have shown to be ineffective. Traditional justice system responses only serve to exacerbate the root causes of violent behaviors and perpetuate racial injustice. The Defender Association of Philadelphia believes that now is the time to commit to long-term investment in public safety. That means investing resources into innovative policies and programs that limit criminal justice responses to those that most fundamentally require a criminal justice response. A well-funded defender is an investment in more reliable and just outcomes for the people we represent. Moreover, it helps ensure a fairer, more efficient criminal justice system that advances the cause of public safety and justice for all Philadelphians. I appreciate your time and will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A couple of questions. Parity, for a long, long time, parity was an issue. Are we good now?
Council President, we're close. We're getting closer. We will probably be addressing that with the council at the next budget cycle. As you know, we are the most recent union shop in the city, and we are in the process of negotiating our first collective bargaining agreement with the local UAW local for our attorneys, and we're in the midst of discussing issues of compensation and benefits. We expect to address this in a comprehensive way during the next budget cycle.
Okay. So actually, the district attorney's office talked about the backlog in our court systems and court cases. Has this, I'm assuming it has, how has this impacted your ability to adequately represent the defendant?
Yes, thank you for that question. The budget cuts last year resulted in our leaving certain professional positions unfilled, both professional and support staff positions unfilled. That included attorneys, investigators, social workers. The caseloads, the case volume that we're looking at is a significantly daunting one. As I indicated in my testimony, we estimate that there will be it will take a substantial effort to get back to an equilibrium. That means even in the budget that we have submitted and which the mayor has recommended, there will be added work even if we backfill all those positions. But without filling those positions, it would be it would really push us almost to the breaking point to add the additional work to the staff, to the reduced staff we have now. People have been working under very difficult conditions. Attorneys have been going to the prison, visiting clients at the prison, even during some of the darkest days of the pandemic, and have endured a lot of hardships this past year. We think it's critical to be able to fill those positions and come back to what our proposed 2020 staffing levels are if we're going to have any chance of digging out of this backlog.
Okay. And I think you've indicated that you are the interim. Are you seeking to be permanent?
So the our board, I believe, is about to announce the search of a new chief for the office next week, and that's going to be a nationwide search. So there'll be I'll be here for a while at the very least before that process is completed.
Okay. Are you interested in the permanent?
I'm considering that.
All right. I just want to know.
My experience has been actually very positive in the past month, and it's been quite gratifying to lead the organization at this moment.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions by members of the committee for this witness?
Council President, Councilmember Thomas.
Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. First of all, I just want to say congratulations to our interim public defender. I appreciate the work you're doing already. Just real quick before we close out this one, I wanted to specifically talk about data as it relates to your budget. My office has been put in a position where we've been able to get some data that has helped driven our legislation and the work that we've done. And Council President talks often about legal opinions, and that's another thing that we've been able to get from the public defender's office. So I'm just wondering, when looking at data and the work that you're doing around criminal justice reform, what's your future plans around data and how the work that's being done around data collection can impact some of the criminal justice reform that you just talked about?
Sure. Thank you, Council Member. When I returned to the office about 2 years ago, and one of the things Chief Bradford Gray had done when she started was developed a policy unit, and one of the principal objectives of the unit was to gather data about policing and about court results and begin to measure all facets of the criminal process. It's been the efforts to date have been very successful and very illuminating and helpful. Our attorneys have been able to gather a significant amount of data about policing initially, and as you're aware, because we shared this with City Council, it revealed some very disturbing patterns of racial bias, and that information in my understanding, is informing some legislation that we're hopeful will shortly be enacted. That work goes on. We want to expand that. We want to expand these efforts into some other areas, particularly including the provision of social services, and to measure the benefits and impacts of the support our community groups and our social services providers provide to our clients. So the old adage, what can't be measured can't be managed. What we'd like to do is see what the impact. We'd like to see who is succeeding, how well they're succeeding, and then that would make our efforts at connecting our clients to needed services more efficient. We also believe that we can that what we know to be true anecdotally, which is connecting our clients to services, results in more successful criminal case outcomes. And when I say that, I mean that it reduces recidivism, and it also makes life outcomes better for our clients as well. We'd like to measure that. We'd like to inform City Council, the courts, and the district attorney of that, of how those efforts are successful, because we believe that information will lead to reform, will lead to better decision making in prosecution, in sentencing, in probation, in every aspect of the criminal process. And the last area that we really would like to initiate is data collection on conditions of confinement, which has been a real subject of concern in the past year. In the first couple of months of this year, I spent a lot of time reading. I tell you, I read hundreds of letters from clients who are in jail, and there are a lot of hair-raising stories about the conditions there. I sat in on the council's hearings in March when we were talking about vaccination, and the correctional officers came and spoke of the conditions of confinement. We would like to capture this data because we think that will also lead to very, very critical and important reforms, both potentially through legislation, but reforms in, again, how prison is used by the judges, how it's requested by the district attorney, and how it's viewed by the Department of Probation and Parole. So those are areas where we are just starting to look into and starting to work with. And if with the budget we proposed, we can make real headway in those areas.
That's good to hear. Thank you for the response, and I just want to say also thank you to Kate Parker and the entire team over there who leads that effort. And I'm glad to hear that this is something that's going to continue. So thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm not seeing any additional questions by member of the committee for this witness. So with that, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you,
for the
Council
work. Good luck.
Thank you.
As it relates to your potential tenure. All right.
Thank you, Council
so
President.
All right. All right. If there are no other questions or comments, we will, committee will stand in recess until Monday, May 24th, 2021 at 9:30 a.m., at which time we will reconvene on Microsoft's Teams. I'd like to say that will be callbacks for Monday. So thank you all, and again, be safe. And see you guys in the morning. Thank you.